For example, the North American Free Trade Agreement requires Canada to treat suppliers of our trading partners no differently from local suppliers. The problem with this bill is that the proposed measures could be inconsistent with Canada's international commitments.
And thank you so much. I'm so pleased to rise today to be able to finally speak to my bill on local foods. This is a bill that I have been working on for a good 2 years with help from throughout the country, with contributions from throughout the country, from producers, from many people who have truly inspired me. And my own leader, Jack Layton, my first leader actually, Jack Layton, really inspired me. And I worked for a long time with the member for British Columbia, and we worked on this pan-Canadian strategy that didn't exist, and I hope now it's going to exist. I was also supported by other members, the member for Masquinongé and the member for Welland as well. Why is it so important for the NDP to support producers and support local food? Well, our producers work the land. They produce the food that meets one of our essential fundamental needs, and that is to be able to eat 3 times a day. So it's fundamental. And producers, agricultural producers, are rarely acknowledged for all the work that they do. This is very demanding work. This is work that requires considerable time, energy, and investment, and yet they do it with passion. They do this with their own hands. And it should be supported on a daily basis by the federal government, as provincial governments do, and as municipal governments should also do. Now, I became aware of this, that is to say the lack of support for producers, because my riding is mainly rural and agricultural. So I have 29 out of 31 municipalities that are rural in my riding. And one of the first things that I did when I was elected as a member of parliament was to go and meet local people, local stakeholders, and so of course I met many producers. And I learned about this circuit in Quebec that people can follow to discover local businesses and local producers. So whether you go to restaurants or hotels or to farms, you can do a sort of stop-by-stop circuit throughout various ridings and learn about and even taste products, whether they be produce, whether it be meat, whether it be wine. And so it's then that I started becoming more and more aware of how important it was to acknowledge the work of these people. And I also became aware of the importance of buying locally when I realized that I myself didn't even know which products came from nearby and which didn't. I didn't know that I could find, whether or not I could find local produce in my own grocery store. So there are many things that I discovered by having conversations with producers and by having conversations with citizens, people of my own age, older people, young people. And I started asking questions. Where do you think the food that we eat comes from? And many children said, well, it comes from the grocery store. Well, it doesn't come from the grocery store. There are people who've worked hard to raise either the food or the animals before it gets to the grocery store and before it gets to our plates. So it's funny, but at the same time it's a little sad because it speaks to how little information that we actually have. And I would like to see this bill become legislation so that producers can really become acknowledged. When you go to the grocery store, more and more people now try and find what the origins of the food they're eating. For example, does the apple that I'm buying come from Chile, or does it come from my riding? Has the apple traveled 10 kilometers, or has it traveled 30 kilometers or 10,000? It's not just an economic impact that this choice has, it's also a health impact. There's produce that meet certain standards that are produced here, and there's produce that comes from elsewhere that meets different standards. But there's also the whole environmental perspective that's important. So buying locally means buying produce or meat that has been produced by people who are nearby. It may seem like a very simple thing, but there are many barriers to purchasing locally. It's very difficult for producers to have contact with consumers. Now, there's the cost of transportation, for example. Before fruit and vegetables come out of the orchard or they come from the farm, well, they have to be loaded into a truck or a boat or whatever, and that costs money. They also have to be labeled. That costs money. There are problems with transportation networks as well. There are several organizations that have started setting up public markets, public drop-off points, so that people can buy, for example, baskets of local fresh produce. But there's a lack of awareness amongst the public. And one of our realities here is that we have a long winter, and therefore producers can't necessarily provide constant supply throughout the year to big grocery chains, and therefore it makes it more difficult for them to have access to that market. We need to think about that. And the federal government also needs to make more of an effort in awareness raising in order to make sure that people know what is growing here, what is growing in their region, when it's growing, and also so that consumers can know during the winter what one can still buy. So even if those farms aren't necessarily operating, it's good to know what can be purchased. So there's a lot of information that our public needs. There are people who've been writing me, emailing me, that I've been having discussions with over Facebook, and I'm being told that they would like to be able to encourage and support producers, but they don't know where to begin. They don't know who to contact or where to go. Now, groceries are making more and more of an effort, or grocery stores, rather, are making more and more of an effort, but there still is a lot of work to do. There could be places, for example, in public markets, in convenience stores. There could be more areas where producers could bring and sell their produce. Because currently, it's not straightforward. It's very difficult, for example, for seniors to go to points that are further removed in order to be able to purchase local food. So it would be nice if they had some sort of drop-off point in their area where they could buy that meat and produce. Seniors are vulnerable, their health is vulnerable, and they should be eating fresh, healthy produce. But they often tell me that they don't, because of the reasons I mentioned and because it's expensive. Now, is it normal that 2 liters of Pepsi cost less than, for example, 1 liter of fresh juice? So actually, a junk food is a lot less expensive than a healthy food. And when healthy food is local food, why is it that it's still more expensive? We need to intervene. We need to support everyone to eat well and for producers to be able to provide that access to their produce. Now, despite these barriers that I've described, more and more Canadians are buying locally, and they want to encourage their local producers. Why? Because it's good for their health, and because producers have a huge contribution to make. Producers actually contribute 8% of GDP each year. That's 1 job out of 8 in Canada. That's the equivalent of $101 billion per year. So just imagine if each and every person were to take $5 each when they do their groceries to buy locally. That's money that goes local. And a local producer actually in our area said if you simply take $5 within your groceries, $5 worth of your groceries, and you spend it locally, that allows a producer actually to make a living and not simply survive. And it also creates more opportunities for consumers.
And we know that since 2006, some 8,000 farms have had to stop their operations because of problems, and they are having trouble finding farmers of the future as well because the ground is very dry, it's an arid continent. Now, we need to do something with the situation. The federal government needs to take action to help farmers and producers. Now, I could continue saying that this bill is a result of two series of consultations with producers, distributors, and people who've worked on food policy across the country. Now, I could talk about the consultations. I don't want to mention everyone, but I consulted nationally and locally with the Canadian Federation of Agriculture, that has our support, the UPA, the Coalition for Food, several retailers, the large grocery chains, and many members of the general public who responded to the call and said, yes, it is very important. My bill has two parts. It requires the federal government to establish a pan-Canadian strategy in conjunction with the provinces. We want the federal minister to sit down with his provincial and territorial counterparts, and also with the farmers and distributors, to have all of these people around the same table to discuss a common definition of local. All of the provinces have a bit of a different definition of what that means. We're also calling for the setting up of a tribunal or a forum where they can exchange best practices, because each province focuses on certain aspects, but producers aren't necessarily aware of what could be done and what's effective. So it would make them aware of tools available to them. So it's important for people to have an opportunity to sit down and to have these discussions. Secondly, we would call on the government to set the example by establishing a local supply chain for its federal institutions, agencies, federal hospitals, prisons, etc. 28,000 cafeterias that could provide an opening or make a larger, more room, in fact, for producers, and that too would make a huge difference. So I hope we'll make it that far and do that, because it's part, if you will, of clear political will by the government. Producers need assistance overcoming a number of challenges. First of all, labor is very difficult to come by, because agriculture is difficult manual labor, working over specific periods of time, and so we need to make a distinction there. And if we don't buy local, then who will? We really need to focus on these aspects. In Canada, there are already more than 2,300 local initiatives that to which the government could contribute to promote them and to help spread them to the rest of Canada. This is important. For us, it's important that the federal government do its share as well, to encourage farmers to be innovative. Things are difficult at present because they're having such trouble simply surviving in many cases. producers to be able to continue to making changes to reducing our environmental footprint as well. We need to support them in their work. And I think that this kind of national strategy would be very worthwhile. So I hope that all members will support me and vote in favor of this bill.
Bon, merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank the member for Beauharnois-Sudbury for raising this important subject of locally grown food. Canada, I'd like to say, is an extremely fortunate nation. We have vast, dynamic industry that can meet the needs of local, national, and international customers. We have an agricultural sector that provides jobs to 1 out of every 8 Canadians and contributes to the health of our economy. As a Canadian, we can certainly say that we're very lucky.
The government recognizes the good intentions of this bill. However, in a practical light, we question if Canadians would truly support legislation that would only add a layer of bureaucracy to the local food movement, a movement that is already succeeding in many regions across Canada. Do we really want to add red tape, regulations, and complications to our farmers' markets, community gardens, and co-ops? And do we want to compromise the livelihoods of farmers who depend on international markets to sell their crops? And the answer is no, Mr. Speaker. Across different levels of government in Canada, there is already strong support for locally grown food. Our approach at the federal level is to focus on national efforts to increase consumer awareness and knowledge of Canadian agriculture. For example, through funding initiatives like the Farmers Markets of Canada, a national organization representing farmers markets across the country. While our government wholeheartedly supports the purchasing of locally grown food by citizens and residents, we recognize that provincial governments have a key role to play in defining what local foods are. And we will continue to work with interested provinces because we are committed to keeping the playing field fair by not favoring one farmer over another or one region over another. Together, we want to break down the internal barriers to trade in this country. The bottom line, Mr. Speaker, is our government will ensure that farmers who market locally have the same opportunities as farmers who export to world markets. And in fact, Mr. Speaker, many farmers do both. So while the idea of a pan-Canadian strategy on local foods is well-meaning, we must remember that trade accounts for a large portion of our farmers' sales. Canadian farmers export to 189 countries around the world. Our agriculture and food exports have been on a growth curve for a number of years. For 2013, all signs point to another record of close to $50 billion. However, Mr. Speaker, trade is a two-way street. That's why we have to be very careful about federal policies that legislate local foods and about rules related to government procurement as advocated in this bill. We can't expect our trading partners to play by the rules if we aren't prepared to do so as well. Canada has made a commitment to follow the non-discriminatory rules contained in various multilateral and bilateral trade agreements. For example, the North American Free Trade Agreement requires Canada to treat suppliers of our trading partners no differently from local suppliers. The problem with this bill is that the proposed measures could be inconsistent with Canada's international commitments, and this would send the wrong message to our trading partners. Our government understands the need to respect our international and interprovincial trade obligations because we need to keep markets open for Canadian agricultural products. Mr. Speaker, our government understands that trade is important, and we understand the needs of farmers. And that's why through our cost-shared programs under Growing Forward 2, we are empowering the provinces and territories to support locally grown food through market development initiatives in their jurisdictions. Our commitment to farmers and our investments in science are helping to ensure that Canada's food comes from the best farming practices right across the country. For example, in Quebec, our researchers are currently working on helping farmers meet the emerging demands for foods with probiotic benefits. In Atlantic Canada, we're developing more varieties of value-added crops such as short-season soybeans. New varieties like these could increase farm revenues by an estimated $100 million. In British Columbia, field and lab studies are helping to minimize the environmental impact of nitrates in surface and groundwater. Groundbreaking research is helping to protect the environment while maintaining optimum crop production. Work is also underway to build upon the challenges of producing food in the north, and this means developing traits that can thrive in colder climates and creating new economic opportunities all the time. In Yukon, for example, our investments are helping farmers to sell their products by promoting local food production and increasing public awareness of Yukon-grown food. Our government has also partnered with the province of British Columbia to deliver a pilot project that will give ranchers the opportunity to process and market their beef locally. This will bring more dollars into their business while boosting the local economy and respecting our international trade obligations. Monsieur le Président, les gouvernements provinciaux.
Mr. Speaker, the provincial and territorial governments have a direct role to play in initiatives designed to support, promote, and to market local food products. Many provinces are putting in place strategies for local production, namely Ontario, which has recently adopted an act dealing with local food products.
The need to draw up a national strategy was not a major issue at federal, provincial, territorial meetings. In truth, a cross-Canada strategy could be seen as federal interference in provincial or municipal affairs. Bill C-539 would also undermine Canada's credibility internationally. It's to be expected that if we don't enforce the rules, our trade partners will. That's why we have to be very careful when it comes to policies that promote local food production or restrict government procurement, as this bill advocates. The North American Free Trade Agreement, as well as other international trade agreements, require Canada to treat providers from its partner countries the same way as we treat local providers. At the same time, we are ensuring that our trade partners follow the rules. We also, given all of the above, we respectfully refuse to support Bill C-539.
Mr. Speaker, and it's, I guess I'm not shocked that the Conservatives are against this bill. I mean, well, I am shocked, Mr. Speaker, because what better bill could we have for farmers and for consumers in this country? I mean, and for the parliamentary secretary to say, you know, well, we're doing this, and you know, I'm not saying that some of the initiatives for local produce is not good of what the government's doing, but I think we can't be just cherry picking certain areas. I think what we're looking at in this bill, and if I can state from the honourable member over here, is that we're looking for more of a Canadian strategy and working with the provinces. And I really, what gets me is when the Conservatives are saying, well, other countries might get angry with us or might call it a bit of a barrier. And I just have some articles here out of the U.S. And here's some of the programs the United States has. And one of the programs first comes up is, it's called Know Your Farmer and Know Your Food Initiative. And this is right out of the United States. One of these trade partners are going to have a big problem with us promoting local food. And it says in 2009, USDA launched the Know Your Farmer, Know Your Food Initiative, an agency-wide effort to create new economic opportunities by better connecting consumers with local producers. As part of the initiative, several funding efforts and programs were announced to assist farmers, help consumers access nutritional food, support rural community development. Oh, the Americans are going to be really mad at us for this one. And here's another program here that the USDA has in the United States. It's called an Agriculture Marketing Service Program. The USDA's Agriculture Marketing Service Administration's several grant programs supporting local food initiatives across the country. The Federal State Marketing Improvement Program provides matching funds to the state agencies to assist in exploring new market opportunities for food and agriculture products and encouraging research to improve the performance of food marketing systems. In 2009, 8 out of 23 grants were awarded to projects supporting local foods, such as the funding from the Colorado Market Maker. So that's how I'm just going to start off, and I know they're getting a little wound up there, Mr. Speaker. If you can keep them quiet down a bit, and maybe they're surprised that I'm supporting an NDP private member's bill. But you know what? When the bill is good, we have to support it. And I think, you know. And I'm surprised with the members over there. I know they know it's a good bill. It's pretty bad. This must have came out of the PMO, or I don't know where it came from. But let's not get into that, because what does the bill ask for? I mean, it asks for improving access to high quality and fresh products, reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Well, I don't know if the Conservatives are for that, but that's what it's in there. The bill recommends a pan-Canadian local food strategy, constitutes a local food program, and it also wants to have local foods bought at institutions. Now, but I think, that being said, let's just talk about the institutions, because as a farmer, and I've sold to them before, and I think what needs to happen here, if this bill is going to be successful, the government has to help farmers develop products that are, that the right size packaging, the labeling, distribution systems. So it takes quite a bit to pull this off. So, and I think it's very important that they work with the provinces to make this happen, especially if you're going to have local products going into the federal institutions of any sort. Another great avenue is that's taking off not only in our country. I was in New Zealand, Australia. Farm markets. And farm markets, and I got a brochure here from the Canadian Farm Market Association, and they're talking about $3 billion of revenue. Now, the Farmers Market of Canada is a national organization dedicated to furthering the valuability of growth and prosperity for Canadian farmers markets. In 2008, the Farm Market commissioned a national study to help the Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada to take the pulse of farmers market industry in the 10 provinces and measure its importance to Canadians and Canadian consumers. Now, one of the most important findings was the value consumers place on being able to buy food directly from the farmer who has produced it. Well, 92% of the shoppers related its importance, and 62% said it was extremely important. Now, the farm markets, as many of you know, it's hard for them to stay open year-round. I mean, and I'd like to talk a little bit about the one we have in Cape Breton. The one in Cape Breton we have, it's called Cape Breton Farmers Market, and it's a non-profit cooperative that's been in operation for almost 30 years, and it's evolving. It started as an outdoor seasonal market, and now it's an indoor a market which attracts thousands of visitors weekly from all over our island. And I'm proud to say, Mr. Speaker, my dad and I were some of the first vendors 30 years ago. We sold eggs and chicken and fresh produce there, and now look at it. But what I'm bringing the attention of our own farmers market, which are thousands across this country, and I think we have to help. I think this private members bill will help those farmers markets, and we have to have more resources for those small farmers. If they're making jams or jellies, if they're value-added products, they're going to need some sort of help there. But I think this could all stem from this private members bill, and I think when you look at our food security, we talk about oil security, but food security is so important. We have a big country. Look at this year alone, like how the food, how propane was disrupted by rail, how the grain was disrupted. How important it is to have more local food. Now, we can't have all, we don't expect that we have the same food year-round locally. I mean, we like to have berries this time of the year. They might have to come from Chile or whatever. But I think it's important that when we have those foods locally, that the farmers have the opportunity and to be able to sell it locally, and that not only that, that the people, the stores, will have the opportunity to buy it. There's a couple things here, like there's 28 million shoppers that visit farm markets. The average purchase price per shopper at a vendor is $32. The average small farmer at these farm markets generates 1 to 5 jobs. The numbers are pretty big when you look at those farm markets. But I think we also have to look, and I mentioned it before in my question, is the grocery store business. And recently I visited a store in Boston, and it was called Bread and Circus. And when you went in the store, if you picked up a bag of carrots and you swiped it, not only told you the price, up on the screen it would tell you exactly the farmer that grew it and the people working on the farm, how they distribute it, if you bought a head of cauliflower. And it was an example that I think that we should encourage our own stores to do, where, anybody, you take a younger person, a child that's in a grocery store, they'd like to know exactly where the products are from. And I think once they know more, I think it's the advantage of not only the consumer, of course, but the farmer and the grocery stores. But this bill, it's only the start, Mr. Speaker, and I think we have to have a Canadian approach. And I know the Conservatives get kind of, they get squirrely when you talk about a national strategy about anything. A national strategy, oh my, we can't have a national strategy. No, but you know what? I think. No, but Mr. Speaker, I think this is something we should be bringing up probably at our Agriculture Committee. We should be looking at it. And I think every member in this House must have a local farmers market in their own community. How much time do I have, Mr. Speaker? 2 minutes. Oh, I got 2 minutes. Not enough time. Think of all the products. Think if you're in the Okanagan Valley, and I see the member up there right now, and it's not just fresh produce. We're talking about wines. You talk about new types of wines in Annapolis Valley now. The farmers market in Annapolis Valley. You go into liquor stores now. So it's more than just food. I mean, you think of the wine industry, how much potential is there if we label it right, if the store shelves in the grocery stores or in the liquor stores have it labeled right. And I think, this bill is more than just for farmers. I think it can also help people who, for local fish. Our local fish, we're from the East Coast, beautiful fish. And I think it's important, though, we have to look at the kilometers on it and how far away local means. But I know in Cape Breton, where we have people come visiting us from right across this country, and many of my members, even the Conservatives, come visit my riding, and they didn't want to leave, but they for various reasons. But when they visit, and whether it's going to a restaurant or going to a farmer's market, they want to taste the local food. And whether it's produce or whether it's fish. And I think, but we have to do more than just this bill. We have to have the resources there for farmers to be able to produce the right type of products for the grocery stores. And what's also very important, Mr. Speaker, is safety. And I think a lot of small farmers sometimes can't afford all the tools that they need for biosecurity and safety of food. And I think we have to help them, because they'll expand and they'll produce more food. So thank you for the time, Mr. Speaker, and I also commend the member for her bill. And I wish the Conservatives will come to their senses, and when the time comes to vote for this bill. It's very important for the farmers.